doing the project.
Project like this, yeah.
Yeah, we could probably ask Mike that, but I mean, it was a lot of time that a lot of us put in. We had a team of about 6 people, and we did it as a training project. So we were getting certified as certified green belts while we were doing it. So it serves as multiple purposes, right? So it helps to improve the patient care in our clinic and how our clinic flows. It also is helping. We actually took what we learned and shared it with all of primary care throughout UNC, which is a much larger patient population that it's benefiting. But then also the way that I think we see it is that those of us who got trained are now taking those skills and using them for other projects. So it took us about a year, which if there were about 5 people on the team, all of whom have salaries, and we would meet once a week for an hour, and we'd come here for training, so that's expensive. I don't know the exact amount, but the purpose was not just we're spending all of this to improve colon cancer screening, but to improve QI in our whole in our clinic, in our whole institution, and to get as sort of faculty training in these skills. So we tried to pick actual sort of like experiments that weren't expensive, if that makes sense. The money that we put into it was our time and training and doing this, but like the actual interventions of like scheduling at the front desk versus scheduling for instance, like the time that the front desk is spending, they were going to spend that time anyways following this up, and now they're just getting it done right then and there. So we tried to pick things to test that weren't like let's get a whole new infrastructure or computer program or something like that. So.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and really, from the point of view of the project sponsor and the person who has to kind of reconcile how we spend our money, 90% of this was training and learning and developing capacity. If we were going to do this just to improve colon cancer screening, we could have done it in a much shorter fashion. I'd run colon cancer screening projects in other clinics before, and one of the things that I had to do was kind of step back and say, you know what, I'm going to stay out and let them learn, even in places where I think there's a way we could have done this faster. Because it is actually useful to go through and use all the different tools just to learn the tools. And I think, from that point of view, we were really successful, and it'll carry over to the next project that isn't something that we have a lot of experience in. So that's, I think, one really important point. And it's a tension, though, and it's a tension that's going to come every time you do a project. Can you do it faster? We want to be efficient. We don't want to just waste resources. But the point that Shauna was making at the end, you've got to, even if you're doing it as a training project, you've got to test interventions that are potentially sustainable. And the big picture here is that now UNC is either getting more or less money from Blue Cross and Blue Shield and Medicare based on how we do on this and other sets of measures. So there actually is a financial case to be made for doing this beyond the health benefits. So it's a little indirect, and it takes a little bit of skill to move the money around our institution, but this actually does have a sustainable core to it.
Great.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was great.
Yeah, so thank you all for your participation.
Please, you do a great job. I was standing over there as the facilitator going, we're not stopping this, because this I feel like was a really great session. And so good job.
Thank you. Sorry
first
to
time
come
out. So what we're trying to do over here is we're trying to wrangle the schedule a little bit. Lunch has not arrived yet, so we were going to try and do some working lunch stuff with some of the next presentations. What we're going to do is just keep going. Andrew Banks, come on over here, Andrew. Oh, he's going to get mic'd up. So Andrew is one of our Six Sigma Master Black Belt folks in the operational efficiency unit. He's based in this building as well. He trains people in this stuff all the time. He's one of my favorite teachers, so I think you'll enjoy the stuff he's going to share with you. And we may adjust the schedule depending on when lunch arrives and that kind of thing, but we'll try to make up time and proceed forward. So thank you. Are you ready?
Just gonna nope, I think I've got this. Let's go here. I do need to steal this from you though.
Okay.
And put that there. Hopefully this will catch up. Well, hopefully the installation of that wireless pointer will catch up with me. Otherwise, I'll just have to go hit enter. So So hopefully I can live up to that introduction. I've been at UNC now a little over 5 years. My educational background is math and physics. I was actually working in Research Triangle Park for semiconductor manufacturers, everything from basic research all the way through operations management. And so about 6 years ago, met somebody, my boss, my current boss, who was very interested in forming yet another group to do quality improvement. In case you hadn't figured that out, here at UNC we tend to be have multiple personalities when it comes to quality improvement. There are several groups doing this type of work, and so our mission, more so than some of the other groups, however, is a little different, and that is our goal is to spread the capability. Okay, so what you see around you, this room, this facility, is sort of a culmination of 4 or 5 years of trying to figure out how to do that the most effectively. And so we now have the training space. We do bring in teams like you just heard Dr. Ratner, and we do help them learn some of what's necessary to do quality improvement. So what I'm going to do in the next 10 or 15 minutes is try to talk about where all this stuff came from. What's with this DMAIC thing, right? We heard about Six Sigma, you may have heard Lean. You've heard PDCA or PDSA, right? What's the difference? What are these things all about, right? And so the truth of the matter is it's really not all that complex. To some degree, a large degree, it's just a repackaging of the same things. That must be locked. Yep, here it is. That we've actually known about for quite a long time, and you guys being scientists are probably very familiar with. Okay, the scientific method. All of these things are based from the same essential principles that you see in the scientific method, right? So you have a question, right? You observe something in nature which you have a question about. You do some background research, let's call it, and you form a hypothesis, right? The very next thing you're going to do is say, well, okay, I need to construct an experiment to test that hypothesis. Conduct the experiment, collect the data, review that data, figure out whether or not it matches your hypothesis or not, and either adjust your hypothesis and try again, or accept your hypothesis as correct. Okay, so this is very similar. Now it's an adaptation of that. All of these are sort of an adaptation of that. But at the same time, they're very systematic, just like the scientific method, right? And they're based on some very solid principles. So in manufacturing and industry, they started using these principles in the 1930s-ish. So what you see around you has been around since 1930s, 80 years, okay, of knowledge with respect to quality improvement. So what was total quality circles, total productivity management, which became Lean Six Sigma in the 1980s, which added to it a little bit with Lean in the 1990s. And so you hear all these words and you think, well, what's it really all about? But it is just the same basic principles of saying, look, we've got a problem, right? We're going to define it well, we're going to baseline it, we're going to figure out what's happening, right? So we can define that there is or verify there's a problem. We're going to find out what the extent, where it lives, how much, who's involved, right? Where it's happening, when it's happening. We're going to get to the cause, right? This root cause becomes important because those root causes are the things that we're actually going to design our solutions around. We want these solutions to be prescriptive to the root causes, right? We can take a big swing at things, but the chances are if we're not focused on what's really causing, what's behind it, what's the diagnosis, right? If we don't have that right, our treatment is not going to be effective. Our solutions will not fix the problem. It will not reduce the problem that we're seeing to any extent. And then, of course, the last piece is verifying it and then making sure it stays in place. Now, you've heard a couple of different speakers this morning, and I can't say any better than they did how that has to happen. It's not easy, right? All of that is really the hard work. To some degree, getting the data, doing the analysis, convincing yourself that you've got root cause, and planning the solutions to address those root causes, that's kind of the easy part. The hardest part is actually implementing those changes, right? And then once you've found ones that work, that are effective, that are successful, making sure that they're maintained. And so that becomes the biggest part of what we have to do in QI and why there are groups of people like myself who are here to help, because you guys have a primary job of providing care to patients. So my primary function is as a meeting facilitator, as a coach for some of these quality improvement tools, and then the third piece is project management, right? Because someone has to make sure that these things keep moving forward on a day-by-day basis, because in the hustle and bustle of taking care of all of the patients, that's what's most likely to fall through the cracks. All right, and so groups of people who come in as coaches are necessary. They help out.